So why have we been playing golf for decades and getting worse? Coming to the range every week, playing golf twice a week, and the handicap gradually goes up. At best, we get it to stay the same. It's almost an accepted fate in golf that our handicap is going to get worse. Yet surely when we do something more, we get better at it. We invest so much emotional and physical effort, and not to mention money. We read the books, but to be fair, the books have been saying the same thing. If you pick up a magazine now and pick up one from 10 years ago, they're probably fixing the same faults. It's a slice. Do you want to hit the ball further? Avoid three-putting. It seems to have been a common problem that no one's ever fixed over decades. Surely we just can't keep going around in a circle. But that's what we're doing. And so is the instruction in the magazines, the videos on YouTube, and the equipment. They're all sending the same message. Surely we need to think about how we're approaching the game. Maybe that is affecting our performance and developing such a deep-rooted mindset that we find so difficult to break free from. These habits that you might not even notice you're falling into. Do you find yourself going to the range, buying the same amount of balls, going to the same range mat, hitting to the same target, picking the same club, even working through the bag, going through the same motions, expecting a different result, but actually when you finish the session, or even midway through the session, you might be asking yourself a question: why am I doing this? Is this another form of self-sabotage that I don't even recognise? I don't even know why I'm getting the results I'm getting. I'm not even interpreting the outcome. I'm not making any real effective change, but I think I am, because I've got my P2 and my P3 right. But is that actually showing us improved performance out there and going to translate to the golf course? Well, maybe it's our perception of practice and play. We're never really practicing. We're always really playing this game. We're just playing in a different environment with a different task, a different challenge. It's just us, the ball, and a golf shot. And the golf shot is just a figment of your imagination. It doesn't really exist. So how well can you visualize and then match a movement, i.e. the golf swing, to that shot? Does the movement you're making actually resonate with that visualization? Or are you aiming at a target and just trying to keep it as close as possible? One ball might go left, one ball might go right, but did you really sense the difference? Did you recognize the difference? Did you see that little draw or little fade? And then what happens if you actually intentionally try to play a draw and a fade? Surely that's the art of the game. Controlling the ball flight, controlling the spin axis tilt. Just like any ball sport, we need to control the spin, because at the end of the day, it's us, it's the ball, it's the golf shot. We could be on the golf course, on the driving range, in a field, on a beach, on a cliff top hitting into the sea, on the 18th at Augusta. We could be anywhere. But how much of a resonance do we have with the ball flight that we're picturing? And how much of a resonance do we have with the movement we're making? If you're not sure, then you're probably not using your time on the driving range effectively. You're probably not learning much about yourself and your game, which means you're really relinquishing the ownership of your game. Think of other sports you play. I'm guessing you don't think about your movement in life until you pick this up, and then things change. Yet why is that? The one thing that we think about our movement with is the one thing that we struggle with our movement with. Yet everything else, we adapt. We adapt to the affordances of the equipment, of the environment, and we act naturally, we adapt. So surely our practice has to be focused on more adaptation and more reflection. We don't construct movement, movement emerges. So how can we elicit this emergence of what actually is optimal mechanics, but they are born out of an intention. They are not constructed. This is not a premeditated movement. This is something that you respond with, and then you recognise, and then that allows you to repeat without trying to repeat it continually on a driving range. It's like riding a bike. In half an hour you can ride the bike, that's it, you're off. Ride the bike on any terrain, okay? You start to adapt and adjust to the challenge. We need the challenge. The target could be anywhere. It's an affinity for the ball flight. It's the resonance with the movement we're making in connection to the ball flight. So first of all, we've got to understand the ball flight. So here's a little bit of a conceptual approach, good imagery to have. There's us, There's ourselves. There's the target. And here's the imaginary target line, which probably is only going to serve to confuse us, especially the body, when we're trying to play a curve. We don't have a target line at the target when we're playing a breaking putt. It's a breaking ball. We're looking at the point where the ball breaks. But how do we hit the ball to that break point? We don't start it on the break point. Our focus is actually away from the apex. The club face is actually pointing just right because the ball's going to curve onto the apex, and the swing path of the club head needs to be further right to curve the ball. So the club face is slightly right of the apex and the swing path is further right of the apex, and the apex is already right of the target because the ball flight's going to take it to the target. So our attention should be well away from the target, yes, on the ball flight, but it's our awareness of the swing that's actually even further right of the target, and we're comfortable with that. That's a mindful awareness of our swing whilst having our attention focused on the flight of the ball. So we feel comfortable. We're going to commit to the swing because we know that's what's going to produce that ball flight. We understand the geometry, the physics behind it, and we're using that in a productive way to help us play the shot. We've got the visual of the ball flight, and now we're developing a feel for the tolerances, the gap between the club face and the path. This gap is going to increase or decrease the magnitude of the curvature. This is how we're going to control the spin of the ball. This is how we're going to control the curvature. Then we orientate ourselves, and now we can start to play around with the ball flight, and now we can learn about the game. What shots am I able to play and what can't I play? And we need to be brutally honest, because the areas that we're avoiding are probably the areas that we need to practice and develop an awareness for. And that's probably then going to transfer through to the rest of the game. It's going to enable us to play through the shapes too, because we're going to be able to develop a much greater awareness of shot shaping, which ultimately gives us more control. So the first thing is we need to be able to know whether we can play draws and fades. And we need to set ourselves a challenge. So to find out more about our game, we can use range games. Just take a notebook with you to the range and set yourself some challenges, some draws, some fades with different clubs, and critically assess yourself. Be honest with yourself. Did you start the ball on target, and did it draw or did it fade to where you wanted it to go? Can you play a big draw? Can you play a little draw? Can you play a high draw? Can you play a fade? Did it start where you wanted it to start? And did it fade or draw how you intended? If not, cross, tick, very easy. Use different clubs. Record the strike. Was it out the middle? Did it feel off the toe? Was it off the heel? Just by shifting your awareness onto these variables, you're already starting to develop your awareness and ultimately a feel for what you're doing. So I use lots of different range games, lots of different books. I've got no affiliation to this company, but range-games.com. It's a great book that I use. Just an easy way of reflective practice. But to be honest, you can just create your own games. You don't have to go and buy books, buy these resources. It does make it a lot easier, but the focus of this practice is to develop self-awareness. And then challenge yourself further. Can you actually hit the bad shot intentionally? Can you hit the big slice? Can you hit the big hook? Can you thin it? Can you top it? Do you have that skill there to do that intentionally? Because we've got all the shots, we just don't know when they're going to come out. So the movement patterns are in there, we just don't recognise them. So we've got to use this type of practice and learn from the experience. If the ball doesn't start on your intended target line, it's probably the club face. If it doesn't curve the way you wanted, it could be the path. It's a combination of both, but can you identify that? So can you start the ball left? Can you start the ball right? Can you start the ball straight? That's the first prerequisite. And then can you start to curve it? Can you start it left, curve it to the left, curve it to the right, start it to the right, curve it to the left, curve it to the right? Dare I say it, start it straight, and then curve it left and curve it right. Now you're starting to gain some form of mastery over the ball flight. If you're struggling with these key elements, then we know where to go. Now we're learning. Now we are objectively assessing the outcome, and now we've got a platform from where we can develop our practice. And we need to recognise those release patterns and develop a sense for where this club head is in space. We don't achieve that by doing the same thing every time, because ultimately that's all we're going to recognise. And if we get it perfect, it produces that perfect shot that one time. And if we're just a little bit off on the next swing, we're hitting it away from target and we don't recognise the swing. We need to explore this space. To do that, I've got a great exercise for you. We're just going to make figure of eights with the club. I'd suggest one hand first, easy swings, and you can already start to appreciate what kind of path this is producing. It's producing the out to in path, the fade path. We loop it around and now we're in to the draw. And then back to the fade. And then we can change direction. And now we're on the through swing for the draw. And the back swing for the fade. So we're starting to play around with this space. Now if I wanted to play the fade, I'll be recognising the space now, the club's swinging through. And I could move my body around to facilitate this. And this is how you adjust alignment. If I want to now feel the fade backswing and the fade follow through, I can move my body around so I can make this path with the least amount of effort. It's a free swing in the direction I want to go to put the spin on the ball. Likewise, if I want to draw the ball, okay, now we're into the draw backswing and now the draw follow through. And now I can move my body around to facilitate this swing path. Now I've made an alignment with a more draw bias. Somewhere in there is straight and then back to fade. So I'm starting to now appreciate the magnitude of change I need to make. And this is what we need to explore. What's going to happen if I aim this way and play a big fade swing? Does it create a big fade? Now I suggest once you've done that drill with one hand, you do two. And once you find that path, let's go both ways. Once you find those paths, move round to your intended path. Now I feel the draw. Move round for that draw and then play a few shots. And does it produce the draw? So that produced the draw. Where did my finish take me? Where's the ball flowing in relation to my finish? I finished in this direction. That's where the swing took me. That's where the journey of the swing took me. And now I'm watching the ball fly. So here's the draw finish. Look where the club is in space for the draw and for the fade. Two totally different spaces. A long way apart. These swings may not feel too dissimilar, but they're travelling through very different space. This club is going to travel back through here. And I'm going to adjust my alignment to facilitate that. So this is going to be a recognisable draw swing. As opposed to the fade from here, it's going to take me over here. Different space. So recognising that swing, that finish, the draw, the fade, where the club's travelling. The figure of eight swing is going to cover all this space. But not only does it give us an indication and a feel for shape, but we can also introduce the trajectory. Where is that peak? We talked about the peak, but what height is the peak at? If we were throwing a ball, we'd be very focused on the peak. That's a very, very important factor influencing how we adjust our movement to create the throw. It's the same in golf. The height of the shot's really important. Are we always looking at eye level, or are we adjusting the height of the shot? What does it feel like for the high draw? What form does the body position take at the end? Same for the low draw. Would somebody be able to recognise what shot you're playing without seeing the ball fly? Would they be able to recognise from the movement you're making, from the swing you make, what your original intention was? Or are you just making the same swing or making very marginal changes and expecting a big difference in ball flight or big corrections? We're probably not developing enough awareness for this spectrum that we need to operate within. So, recognise the height. What's it feel like to swing to a high apex? What does the figure of eight swing feel like to a high apex? If I go for the draw downswing. What does it feel like when I swing up? Where does that take me? And if I stop into the finish, where did that path take me? What position do I recognise and associate with that ball fly? And then what's it like to swing normally on a draw path to that finish? So we're using the figure 8 to reinforce these feelings and to recognise these feelings, which are going to instill confidence, because we know where we're going with our movement. We know what this movement's going to produce, and we know what this ball flight's going to be before it even leaves the club. We've all had that feeling before, and we should be practicing that feeling. So using these awareness drills, objectively reflecting on what happened, creates a really good feedback loop and a really good practice design to help you get better.